identity means about like what you look like, stuff, and how you like express yourself and what you're wearing.
I think identity is yourself, and also it could be being yourself. What makes me special is in my opinion, I think I'm crazy and quirky, and I have my 4 sisters, which are very nice, and I have a mom and a dad, and I live in New Jersey, which is fun.
What makes me special because I'm unique. I'm adopted. I have a family who actually adopted me. They wanted me, so I feel special in that way. And I'm sporty. I'm intelligent. I'm glad I'm a different person of color because I get to experience what it's like to be living with 2 white people and two black people. And I'm happy because Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks made it possible for black people like me to use the same things that whites get to do too. So I'm happy about Martin Luther King Day.
I think everybody should like themselves because everybody is who they are, and that makes them special. Everyone should be happy about what color they are, what race they are, whatever. Just be happy!
I would make the kids line up before they come into class, and then they would stand by their desks, and I would say, "You may sit down." When I sit down, I say, "Good morning, Mr. Byrne." I was very strict because I was afraid the kids would discover I was gay. I'm an English teacher. You're teaching literature, and some gay scene or character come up, and I would start to blush. I was always frightened until one year I decided to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade, because they refused to let the gays march in the parade. And I thought, I got to take a stand. I just wanted to be myself. So I went and marched with them, and the next day I went to school. And the kids asked me, "Where were you yesterday? It was St. Patrick's Day. You were drunk." I said, "I was not. I was marching in the parade." And they said, "Well, who were you marching with?" I said, "With the Irish Gay and Lesbian Organization." And they said, "Why were you marching with them?" And I said, "Because I'm gay." And they were so kind. They saw that I was nervous and they helped me along. It had hurt me to live in the shadows. And then when I came out, it freed me to teach. It made me better at helping kids who had their own particular secrets. That class that I came out to, they asked me to be the graduation speaker. And I talked to the parents about how proud they should be of their children for having taught me and helped me through a really difficult time in my life. It was a wonderful turning point.
After having moved from Virginia to New York City in August of 2009, although I was extremely scared and hesitant to start at a school like Friends at first, I soon enough grew to love Friends. I think that the community that we've built here is unlike any other, and the bond that students have with each other is amazing, and I cherish it. I think that the friends that I've made here are some of the most important people to me, and I don't think that I would have been able to find that sense of home in any other community. Though my transition was hard in and of itself, my friends made it as easy as it possibly could have been for me. Though at first it was hard for me to share the Indian part of my identity, I now feel more than comfortable sharing my culture with the students, my peers, and my classmates. I find that as I grew older and as I started in the high school at Friends, I became much more comfortable sharing my culture with others, and I even was able to host an event called India at Friends to share my identity with the community, which I don't think many other schools would have welcomed as much as Friends did. When I started in the high school at Friends, I was confronted with numerous opportunities to get involved in diversity work, social justice work, human rights work, etc., so on and so forth. And I believe that it was each of these opportunities and the people who gave me these opportunities that has allowed me to explore multiple different issues and then focus in on a few that I care deeply about. For example, social justice, including racial justice, socioeconomic justice, etc.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you could join us. My name is Bo Lauder, and I am the principal of Friends Seminary, and I've just started my 19th year as leader of this wonderful school. It's good to see all of you. 235 years ago, when the school was founding, our founding fathers planted the seed of who the school would become. They planted a seed of equity by making our school coeducational and providing an equal education for girls and for boys. And it wasn't long before they were dismantling gender stereotypes. Girls were playing baseball and boys were taking home economics. Even today, as a reminder of that era, all of our sixth graders take a class in sewing. That devotion to what should be and can be done with the hands is still important at our school. Over the years, that seed of equity planted by our founders grew to reflect the Quaker values of inclusive community, equity, and the belief that there is the light of God in all. Tonight, you will see how this seed, planted some 235 years ago, now stands like a mighty tree as the core of who Friends is today. A school where all can be who they are and can become perhaps even who they wish to be. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Jason Craig Harris, our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Jason.
Thank you so much, Bo, and thank you, Friends, for being here. And we're so delighted to welcome you to Friends Seminary. Indeed, we are virtual, but I still feel like I can feel the tangible energy in the room of all of us being connected. And I'm so glad I see a range of folks. I see some wee folks who have joined us, and I've also seen some adult friends and some teenagers. I'm just so delighted that we have all gathered here on this evening. It's good to be with you. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment so that we can walk through a few pieces together. Again, my name is Jason Craig Harris, and I have the honor and privilege of being the Director of Diversity and Inclusion. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm delighted to welcome you tonight. Thank you for choosing to spend your evening this way as we retell the story, and we tell it over and over again as a way to remind us of who we are. But we're going to tell you a story about how we as a Quaker school approach culture, identity, and inclusion. Before we get started, I want to invite us to settle into a mindfulness moment. So I want to ask you to adjust your bodies into a comfortable posture so that you can access as full of a breath as possible. You may relax your shoulders and your jaw, releasing any tension that you've been carrying throughout your day. You might close your eyes or let them wander. And we'll take a deep breath together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale and exhale. And I'm going to play the sound of a chime, and I just ask that you allow that sound to wash over you. Thank you so much. Our goal this evening is to share with you a few data points in a much larger story. These appetizers, if you will, are meant to leave you wanting the full meal that is the Friends Seminary experience. Do pardon the food metaphors, as you can perhaps see what I love the most. Tonight, you will meet a range of Friends community members, from students and parents to deans, directors, and divisional leaders. We will explore foundational Quaker beliefs, as well as share examples of programming in each division that works to make these ideals a reality. As you listen to what we share, I encourage you to consider where you hear echoes of your own family's values.
I'm Nailu. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a student at Friends. I'm a member of the Service Committee and the Jewish Culture Club, and I co-lead the Diversity Club. There are special spices or ingredients when mixed together in the right proportion create a very special community where each individual is seen, heard, and known, honored for their unique gifts, and celebrated for all of what they bring to the school community. Please keep the word spices in mind, as you will hear it again shortly.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julian, and I use the he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a student at Friends. I'm a member of the Service Committee, the Black Culture Club, and the Diversity Club. I would like to draw your attention to an excerpt from the school's diversity and inclusion mission, which names some of the Quaker-inspired ingredients that Nyla referred to. So I'll read it. We believe that the quality of the truths we know is enriched and deepened by welcoming people with diverse experiences of the world into our community. We want to foster a community that addresses the challenge of valuing difference and making every individual feel welcome, supported, and safe. A community in which each person is asked to make the rigorous commitment to recognize the light within every other, to hear that piece of truth each person brings to the continuing dialogue, which is the foundation of our community. Now I'd like to ask the Friends group, what resonates with you?
Hi everyone, my name is Justin. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a senior here at Friends, and I co-lead the Latinx Culture Club and Diversity in Political Thought. And what resonates with me is the Quaker idea of ongoing revelation, which is embedded in this statement. This idea means that our ability to understand reality and the truth more fully depends on who's in the room. The greater our diversity, the fuller our understanding of the truth will be. If just one person leaves the table, our access to the truth will be diminished. If you walk out of that door, I'm gonna miss something. I need you and you need me.
Hi, I'm Natasha. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm a parent at Friends. I co-lead the Parents Association's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. One thing that stands out to me is the idea that valuing difference can be challenging. Understanding diverse perspectives takes lots of empathy. We are committed to the uncomfortable and messy work of dialoguing across lines of difference and realize that it is a muscle that we must exercise every single day. In this increasingly polarized, divided, and even hateful world, dialogue is a foundation of community and justice.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Shirley Ann. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am also a parent at Friends Seminary. I co-lead the Parents Association Diversity and Inclusion Committee along with Natasha. The different takeaways that you've just heard are grounded in the basic fundamental Quaker belief, which is there is that of God in everyone. Quakers believe that every single person has a special light within us. We might call that special light dignity. We honor each person's light or each person's dignity by inviting them to share who they are and the wisdom of their lived experience with the wider community.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lietzel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Dean of Co-Curricular Programs, and I oversee the newest department of the school, the Center for Peace, Equity, and Justice. The ideas you've just heard are profound. We work hard to put them into practice every day through our core values, what Quakers call testimonies. We teach every adult and student in our community a special acronym. You may recall the word Nilu asked you to remember, the SPICES. The acronym stands for the testimonies of simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. And it's through focusing on the things that truly matter, through peaceful interactions where we show up with integrity, through loving and inclusive service to each other, through making sure that everyone has what they need to flourish and that our language reflects inclusion, through taking care of our resources and our planet. Through these things, we honor the light within everyone.
Hi, I'm Kimby and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the Director of Service Learning and Civic Engagement. Given our beliefs and values, it won't be surprising to you that we aim to nurture and practice curiosity, empathy, and compassion. In all of our classrooms, in all of our offices, in every lesson and project, in every co-curricular event and experience, and in every institutional decision we make, we are working collaboratively to create a culture that equips all community members, especially students, to bring about the world that ought to be.
And now we're going to invite our academic dean, Will Hopkins, to share a few thoughts with us.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. I'm Will. I'm the academic dean, and I use he, him, and his pronouns. Now that you've heard a bit about why we do what we do, we're going to share a few examples of how we do it across the curriculum and the co-curriculum. There are a variety of pedagogical frameworks we use to shape the educational experience at Friends, and one of the frameworks that informs our work is known as the social justice standards, created by the organization Teaching Tolerance. The framework identifies 4 goals of an anti-bias, anti-racist, and inclusive education. First, identity. Each child will demonstrate self-awareness, confidence, family pride, and positive social identities. Diversity. Each child will express comfort and joy with human diversity, accurate language for human difference, and deep, caring human connections. Justice. Each child will increasingly recognize unfairness, have language to describe unfairness, and understand that unfairness hurts. Action. Each child will demonstrate empowerment and the skills to act with others or alone against prejudice and/or discriminatory actions. Through ongoing professional development, our teachers work hard to sharpen their craft and their implementation of anti-racist and anti-bias curricula and pedagogies. The stories you will hear now from my colleagues will reveal these goals at work.
Good evening, everyone. I am Kelly. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the assistant head of lower school. One example from lower school life that embodies the goals that Will outlined is our identity unit. This is in which a time for our youngest learners to begin to develop a vocabulary for accurately describing and inclusively honoring the full range of phenotypic differences. Here, you can see our lower school students creating a self-portrait. They spend significant time learning how to mix primary and secondary colors to approximate their own skin colors. Along the way, they learn a bit about the science of melanin. Not only do our youngest learners learn how to approximate skin color, they also learn how to depict differences in hair texture using a variety of materials like yarn, burlap, and wool. Students also learn about different eye colors and how to paint them with as much accuracy as possible. As students create these self-portraits and share their work with each other, they learn accurate language for human differences, and they learn that differences are worthy of being celebrated. They learn how to talk about their own bodies and how to speak respectfully about the bodies of others. This unit goes deeper by having students work with their families to research the origins and meanings of their first names. This name study unearths the richness of heritages, cultures, and family histories represented in the class. At the end of the unit, each student is represented to the class and their name study is read aloud for the whole class to hear and celebrate. It is a beautiful moment of visibility and dignity for all of our students. This work in the classroom is buttressed by a lot of co-curricular programming with diverse thought leaders and storytellers, including parents who deepen our understanding of culture and belonging. Furthermore, this early unit in lower school life lays the groundwork for more complex studies focused on equity, justice, and advocacy later on. By the time students take the project-based learning course with the staff at the Center for Peace, Equity, and Justice in 4th grade, students are ready to learn about the differences between equity and equality, the unfairness of poverty, the power of microfinancing, and the responsibility to take creative action against poverty and economic injustice. Every lower school child learns what it means to be a change maker and an ally.
Hi, everyone. I am Punkti. I use she, her, and hers pronouns, and I'm the head of the middle school at Friends. In the middle school years, we build on the work that happens in lower school around identity, culture, and inclusion. In English classes, students read challenging literature that unearth the challenging histories of bias, racism, and exclusion in the United States and beyond. They have courageous conversations about identity, agency, and the nature and boundaries of empathy. Reading coming-of-age autobiographies and novels naturally gives rise to self-reflection among students. Structured writing activities that foreground text-to-world connections enable students to process their own experience. And while COVID-19 has impacted our learning experience, it has not stymied our efforts to help middle schoolers to learn about the world and connect with the world. In fact, Zoom has created important opportunities for our young people. Here you can see CNN senior national correspondent Kyung La speaking with a middle school history class. She was zooming in from the battleground state of Arizona in late October to explain the Electoral College, journalistic integrity, and being in the front seat of history. La shared stories from the campaign, noting that she has seen an increase in young people at rallies with parents who want to make politics a life lesson. She took questions from students on poverty, rent insecurity, COVID-19, and important life lessons like making mistakes. She explained to her students, making mistakes is how you learn to improve. The important part is what you do after. And this is something that we tell our students every day. In the middle school, I have had the pleasure of joining the staff of the Center for Peace, Equity, and Justice in teaching a unique curriculum that we call Go Lead. Every student in the middle school moves through 4 years of this powerful curriculum that's concentrated on social and environmental justice. From access to clean water, to waste and the human impact on the environment, from global human rights issues like bonded child labor and educational equity, to social justice issues like combating, escalating, and institutionalized hate in society. Our middle schoolers learn about complex global and national challenges, and they engage in service learning projects that enable them to take action for progressive change.
Bye-bye. I'll come back if I want to, okay? I can come back if I want to, right?
Good evening. I'm Kate. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the head of upper school. In the upper school, we continue to build on the foundations laid in the lower and middle divisions with a vibrant curriculum that aims to represent a wide range of human experience. From reading the Hebrew Bible as a world-shaping literature to analyzing the work of literary giants like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, James Baldwin, and Toni Morrison. From examining the history of the world's major religions and belief systems to studying world history from an anti-racist, anti-colonialist framework. From assembling data sets that illustrate homelessness and gerrymandering in New York City, to dissecting scientific data on the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Students in the upper school are immersed in curricula that inspire global citizenship and make academic pursuits relevant to everyday life. Studying world languages and the cultures from which they emerge is a critical part of the Friends experience. We offer Latin, Chinese, French, and Spanish. In addition, we're one of the only schools in New York City that has an Arabic language and Middle Eastern culture program, which began at Friends over 10 years ago. Under Bo's leadership, the school engaged in a community-wide conversation on expanding ancient and modern language offerings. At a time when the politics of division and hate were raging on in the wider culture following the tragic events of 9/11, Friends Seminary was investing in peace building. The community decided that Arabic would be the next language taught at Friends, and therefore a critical bridge to an often demonized region of the world was made. Here you can see Arabic language students studying Syrian culture on a trip to the Brooklyn Museum. Their rigorous studies in culture, history, and society position upper school students to go beyond the proverbial four walls of our school. Students regularly earn spots in competitive academic programs that extend their learning outside of school. From fellowships at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which one of our students this evening has recently earned, to internships at the Global Youth Online News platform, News Decoder, from the Semester Away program at the School for Ethics and Global Leadership, to the Holocaust Studies program, Witness Theater. Upper school students are lifelong learners who care deeply about understanding the world that is so that they can bring about the world that ought to be.
And this is precisely where the school's newest academic department, the Center for Peace, Equity, and Justice, steps in. Created to be a hub of the school's Quaker values, CPEG, as we affectionately call it, seeks to connect ideas, resources, and people to advance social justice, build inclusive and sustainable communities, and foster lifelong commitments to public service. CPEG brings together service learning, civic engagement, diversity and inclusion, as well as global education programming. And every year, CPEG partners with students and adults to create programming that empowers the whole community to engage in work at the intersection of head, heart, and hands.
We hear from guest speakers whose powerful personal stories inspire us to look critically at our own relationship to justice, to learn more about critical issues, and to take informed action to make a real difference in the world. Students, parents, faculty, and staff all join together for community-wide sessions like this one to engage in powerful intergenerational conversations about what change requires of us all.
We explore our identities and stories through dialogue sessions that help us to unpack our experiences. We listen courageously to the experiences of others and bravely confront our privileges and blind spots. We explore diverse dialogue methods, including the indigenous tradition of peacemaking circles, as we aim to practice perspective giving and perspective taking. We practice conflict resolution and restorative justice, believing that the work we do around community building inside school is as important as the service work we do outside of school. We know that dialogue is the pathway to change.
We travel around our own country as well as the wider world to better understand global challenges and complex realities, and to witness the kinds of changes that can happen when people build partnerships and coalitions across difference.
The more we learn is the more we are able to exercise student-centered leadership, where we can design events that educate our peers on urgent social and political issues. Together, we lift our voices to end racial injustice and to imagine a future in which Black, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous lives truly matter.
We collaboratively design and participate in an annual day-long conference focused on social and environmental issues, often featuring storytellers, activists, thought leaders, and elected officials from around the country.
And we take action on the things we care about and invite our peers, teachers, and families to join us. We know the power of the written word to affect change.
And we know the power of our voices, the power of us coming together as a collective to demand accountability and justice in our society. We are grateful for this Quaker education that teaches us how to create inclusive communities, how to challenge unjust practices and laws, and how to bring about a world that ought to be.
And finally, we know how to celebrate because joy is an act of resistance. Joy is a powerful tool in the struggle for dignity and justice for all. This is what a Friends education is all about. Inner work that produces outer work, inner change that results in outer transformation, identity, diversity, justice, and action, head, heart, and hands.
Thank you so much, friends, for listening so attentively to my friends and me as we shared about why a Friends Seminary education is a truly transformative experience. We have time for a few questions. And so if you have a question, we're going to encourage you to lean into discomfort, to be brave, and to pop it right into the chat so that we can have a bit of a conversation among us. All right, it seems as though we actually have our first question, and it seems like it's directed toward a student. How does it feel to be a student at Friends during this politically challenging time when the country appears to be so divided? That's a great question. Justin, can I pitch that to you?
Absolutely, yeah. Obviously it's no secret that that we're in a time of great political strife in this country. But what I found so wonderful about the Friends experience is just how willing this community is to discuss these issues with us and to lean into these uncomfortable topics, however formal or informal these discussions may be. Friends recently hosted an assembly about the recent Supreme Court confirmation and on voter suppression in marginalized communities that a bunch of students helped to bring together, that featured some expert guest speakers. And we've also had ample opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with students and faculty alike about our current polarized political climate. But what I've found is that Friends is a place where, as we've all heard throughout this evening, in which every person has in some way engaged with social and political issues. So students and faculty are always more than happy to talk about these issues and sort of think them out and talk them out with each other.
Thank you so much, Justin. Nailu or Julian, do you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. So, as Justin said, there have been a lot of opportunities for us to get together as a community and talk about what's going on in our current world. And as we highlighted earlier in the presentation, dialogue is a huge part of the Friends experience. So over the summer, I actually attended a course held by Friends and facilitated by CPEDGE entitled Circle Keeping, and we all learned how to keep circles, and we learned to become facilitators, in which we can foster an effective dialogue. And it was a 3-week course, I think, and it was really meaningful to go to, and it just really reinforces that idea of dialogue in the Friends community. And we actually still talk a lot about what's going on in our greater world. So I really appreciate that about Friends.
Thank you so much, Julian. And let's move to our next question. I'm seeing a question around how do we manage a situation in which a person inadvertently harms someone on the basis of identity or culture? Perhaps the person says something that's a little bit of offensive or harmful. How do we handle that at Friends? And so I'm gonna actually, let's see if I can pitch to Aaron, the head of the lower school. Do you want to share a few words on how we handle mistakes related to identity?
Sure, thanks, Jason. I think first of all, we expect mistakes to happen. And so we want children to know that when a mistake happens, that there are things that we can do in response to that mistake. But the worst thing we could do is pretend or hide the fact that it occurred and not addressing it. So, Jason's often a great ally in this work, and we work collaboratively as a team. Oftentimes, faculty, divisional leaders, and Jason partner together to think about, how can we support children in expanding their understanding of whatever the core concept of that's inherent in the mistake is, so that we can all grow our understanding of that topic or that issue, and then helping children find language to take ownership for whatever it is that they played a part in, and encourage and making sure that children are also prepared to hear each other in those moments. And so oftentimes that can take place in the form of a restorative circle. It can also take place in smaller settings, with a few children working together to work something out. But at the center of it, it's about being able to expand your understanding of the core concept, being able to acknowledge what's happened and take ownership and responsibility for it, and see if there's anything you can do to help your peer or peers feel better or move to a new place in that moment. And then for other children to be able to receive the apology and respond to it. And I would say that at the core is the basic process that we would use depending on whatever the issue is.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Really appreciate that response. We have a question here around metrics. So what are the kinds of metrics that we use to measure the effect of increasing diversity and showing change? And so I'm wondering, Will, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing on a kind of internal census and demographic data. Can I pitch that to you, Will?
Yeah, sure, Jason. It's a great question. We use a number of standard metrics to assess our ongoing efforts in becoming a more inclusive and diverse community. What does our student body look like? Race, background, and other metrics of identity. We look at faculty very closely and importantly, and we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that our students see themselves represented in their teachers. And so every year as we're hiring, we're trying to cast a wide net to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure so that our faculty can represent the community that we're a part of. And then I would say that beyond those, we are trying to not just take those demographic measurements, but we're trying to keep track of the experience and what it feels like. And so we're constantly engaging in dialogues to keep track of the pulse of our student body. But then we're also engaging in surveys and opportunities for students to give us the feedback on what it's like to be themselves at Friends Seminary and how effectively they've been able to blossom as the person that they are in this school. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much, Will. So we have a great question here, which gets at, the ways in which diversity sometimes in how we talk about it in the wider culture sort of gets reduced down to just race, right? And so there are some folks who are wondering specifically about how we approach socioeconomic inequities within the school. And I think there's a couple pieces in that question. I think one of them is perhaps how we teach and talk about socioeconomic inequities. And I want to pitch it to Liesl to talk a little bit about PBL, because I think that's a really interesting curricular example. And then I'll pitch it to someone else after. Liesl, would you take it away?
Happy to, Jason. One of our goals in developing our service learning curriculum was to create a scope and sequence for our students. So beginning in 4th grade, Kelly spoke about this. Beginning in 4th grade, we start to unpack some of the social justice terms, such as equality and equity. And our students, in a developmentally appropriate way, begin to explore the world perspective. Weaving global education into all of our service learning and diversity inclusion programming is very important. So our students are exploring the concepts of equity around the world. We look at case studies right now. We've just finished looking at a case study in Ghana, and soon we will be switching over to Colombia. But gathering global perspective on these challenges is very important, and also giving our students a chance also to engage with the hands. So our students in the spring semester of PBL will be forming their own social entrepreneurial businesses, using their profits to fund Kiva microfinance loans that their investment groups will select.
Thank you so much, Liesl. And I'm gonna call on Paige, who is our Director of Financial Aid and Affordability, with whom we work quite closely, me, Paige, and Harriet, thinking quite a bit actually about this question related to culture and socioeconomic inequities. So Paige, would you share a few words about some of the efforts that we have taken as a school to really address this question of affordability, as well as the culture of belonging?
There we go. Sorry about that. You're on mute. Everybody's favorite 2020 quotation, I think. Thanks, Jason. I think first of all, it's really meaningful that the title of the work that I do is Director of Financial Aid and Affordability. And I think one of the things to think about is that when we talk about affordability and affording friends, it's a community conversation as opposed to perhaps compartmentalizing and separating into thinking about those who receive financial aid packages and those who don't. Because we are really a community that's aware of kind of an incongruence between what it means to be a Quaker school and what it means to be a private school, that the tuition costs as much as about what the average New York City income is. And so being really honest about that fact is one way to engage the entire community in a conversation about how every person in our school deserves to have pride of place. And as a financial aid committee, we think a lot about not just tuition aid and financial aid, we think about all of the extra expenses that also need to be covered and also need to be supported in order for all students and families to feel like they have access to the whole program. And that piece of the work that we do has been really meaningful to me. I work with Jason and I work with Harriet. We also work with our CFO and COO on making sure that we are being excellent stewards of our budget so that we can maximize the reach of the limitations on our funds. And as a result, I think it means that students and families in all divisions really know that Friends is a place for everyone. And every person feels when they walk through the door at Friends, regardless of different pieces of their identities, including what they can afford, that they can bring their fullest selves, and anything that we can do. I grew up in, I think, a really healthy healthy perspective that has guided a lot of my own work is that you can tell a lot from about what an institution values based on how they spend their money. And I think that it's been meaningful to me at Friends to see the ways that we live our mission through the work that we do in financial aid and affordability, and ensuring that students and families have equal access to all parts of the program.
Thank you so much, Paige, for that response. And one of the things I want to lift up out of what you shared is that, inclusion, equity, and belonging takes a lot of work. It actually takes concrete work and deep commitment by the school, by its leadership, in order to make that a reality, what you're sharing a reality. And so I want to pitch it to Bo, our head of school, for a moment, because I think there's a story behind this, right? This commitment to diversifying our school, not just in terms of race, but also in terms of socioeconomics. And there's a story here about the commitment of our board and our head of school working together collaboratively to make sure that that's possible. Bo, would you share a few words about some of the work that you've done with our trustees on trying to ensure that the Friends experience is affordable?
Sure, Jason, thank you. I think as Manhattan and New York in general have become more and more expensive, we've been forced to confront that fact and how it impacts our student body. And it's become, frankly, harder and harder to keep our school economically diverse. That hasn't stopped us, but it's an additional challenge. 16.5% of our tuition income is devoted to financial aid. And we were one of the earlier schools, I believe, to recognize that it's not just about tuition. We need to make students who come to Friends feel like they have access to everything that we have. So we started funding what we call ancillary needs, things like tennis shoes, like jerseys and jackets, and other things that students would need to feel that they visibly belonged. And some of our funds are set aside for that need. I'd like to also just tell one quick story about a fund that we just set up this fall. Of course, there's been an economic toll taken by the pandemic, and many of our families are suffering as a result of that financially. And response to that, we created what we call the Friends as Family Fund. And that is a fund that is strictly for people who suddenly find themselves in need, perhaps can't cover tuition, perhaps needs money for the meal plan or other kinds of things. We've even helped people with rent. But the point of the fund is keeping those people as members of our community. And we raised a very, very nice sum. And I would venture to guess that 30 or so families benefited, and perhaps even were able to remain at Friends because of that fund and the generous donors who made it possible. So that's just another example, I think, beyond financial aid, where we are sensitive to our community and the needs in our community.
Thank you so much, Bo, for your response. We have a challenging question, I think, that a family has posed to us, but I think it's important. And so I'm wondering, maybe Kate, I'm going to ask this question to you, which is, how do we at Friends turn the kind of the mirror back on ourselves? What are the different ways in which we critically analyze who we are and whether or not we are achieving what we have set out to accomplish? What kinds of professional development do we do? Like, what are the mechanisms, right? I mean, Bo often says that Quakerism is better caught than taught. And so how are we embodying it, right? And what are we doing to sort of analyze that? What are your thoughts about that, Kate?
Well, thank you for that challenging question. It does send me inward and immediately thinking through, how am I going to answer this? And the first thing I feel like comes to mind is I've worked in 3 independent schools in New York City. And one of the things that Friends has helped me be really mindful of is naming who I am. You notice that all of us introduced our pronouns when we spoke who we are aloud. We often do that as well with gender identities, our racial identities, our sexual identities when it's appropriate in a certain context, and thinking through what does it mean to say what I'm saying based on that identity. So for example, in the English department, when we teach challenging works that reference different identities and different experiences in the political and historical landscape, what does it mean to say the words aloud or read about them or speak about them if I am a white person? How might it be different if I were a Black person? How might it be different if I were a man, if I said those words aloud, or if I spoke and testified to an experience? So I feel like the community builds structures in for us all to have conversations with one another that helps us recognize what we can see and what we can do, and where those limitations lie as well, that because of who I am and because of the experiences I've had, that I am not all-knowing, and that I have a perspective, and that I need to remain humble as I lead a discussion or as I launch an inquiry, because it's not a neutral stance that I'm taking and won't be received as such. So I need to be mindful of my own identity, and then constantly revisiting and thinking through, how's this going to land if I do not have my identity?
Thank you so much.
That's an attempt.
No, that was really
wonderfully
helpful.
challenging.
I mean, it reminds me of why I've stayed friends for so long, in that I do believe that I'm a better person, and I've been sort of through this process of being beautifully crafted and edited and revised by the Friends community. And that's why I've stayed for so long, because of that deep commitment in being authentic human beings who care deeply about the world and who model that in their everyday life. So I thank you for that response. I'm seeing another question here around service learning work in the wider community. And so Nailu, I'm wondering if you can perhaps share a little bit about an initiative that you've been involved in. And then when you're done, I think I'm going to pass it to Kimby to share a little bit about some of the work that we've done in our commitment to transforming the wider world.
So really, like, you can do any like service projects that are like align with your values and your core values. So an initiative that I like tried to like partner with like the school with, or just like that I was really engaged in was called Books Through Bars. And so I took like a group of students, and we went with like Kimby, and we went and we read like letters from incarcerated people. They just like asked like what books they wanted, and like just like genres. And so we packaged books and like sent it back to them. And those prisons were mainly in like Texas, but they were all around like the United States. And so that was like an initiative that I tried to like start up just because like it was aligned with like my core values, because I'm really passionate about mass incarceration.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nailu. Sister Kimby, do you want to add a few things?
Sure. First, I just want to affirm that Nailu not only tried, but succeeded in leading that initiative and gathering other folks and educating folks about mass incarceration, thinking about the connections between mass incarceration and gentrification, and talking to parents at the PA Diversity and Inclusion Committee, leading a school-wide book drive to gather books. It was robust work and really engaged the head, hearts, and hands. And she deserves to be recognized for that. And I think that example is something that really, in my role, I try to support students who have passions like Nylu does, and building out those passions so that we can understand the root of the issue. Starting in 5th grade, even younger, especially in 5th grade, students begin to really grapple with the idea of justice, and justice, fighting for justice requires understanding what a problem is. And that work just continues to build over time, so that by the time students are graduating, they are ready to go into the world and identify what keeps them up at night, and go and set the world on fire to really make a change and have the tools to do so.
Thank you so much, Kimby. And what's interesting about how the questions are coming in is that people are already sensing that we have a concentric circle model for how we think about nearly everything. We start with the self, then we move out into our immediate community to make a real difference. And then we also move beyond that. So I actually want to pitch it back to Liesl to talk a little bit about global education and global travel, both our domestic immersion experiences and our international immersion experiences. I think that there is some post-COVID imagination emerging amongst our guests. So if we could share a little bit about that, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Liesl.
Happy to do so. The Global Education Program at Friends Seminary is a thriving one. Just in the 10 years that I've been at the school, we've really grown our programming. Students begin pre-trip preparations before an immersion experience to learn all that they can to gain perspective. We connect with our peers before going into country, before we're in the field. And then we also spend a lot of time developing relationships, sustaining relationships within those travel experiences. Reflection is a really big part of our growing and expanding our global competencies, seeking multiple perspectives, collaborating and communicating across differences. And I think that some of the countries that we visited, it just makes me, and during COVID, during this pandemic, I was doodling all the different countries, and it just brings a smile to my face. My last trip with students was to South India, and we spent an incredible time really engaging with communities in Goa and other places. Students were in Taiwan recently. You heard about the civil rights trip that we've done. China, Peru, Colombia. We had a trip planned to Panama where we were going to be working with an indigenous tribe right before COVID hit, but we will pick that back up. And students are also involved in helping pitch ideas for global immersion experiences. There are students right now who are very interested in developing a trip that will connect them with native indigenous folks, and we are looking to build that relationship right now so that once the travel opens up, we can go.
Thank you so much, Liesl. And I have to say that just as this kind of work is not possible without leadership from various folks, but especially our head of school and our trustees, it's also not possible without parent and caregiver support. We have to have parents who are engaged, who care deeply about these issues, who choose Friends because of the values of the school. And so I have a question here in the chat related to parents, and what roles do parents play in all of this kind of diversity, equity, inclusion focus? And I wonder if I could pitch it to perhaps Natasha, if you want to start. If you could share a little bit about some of the work that you do as co-chair of the Parents Association Diversity Inclusion Committee. And then after you're done, I want to pass it to Shirley Ann to share a word as well.
Hello, everyone. So some of the work that we do just to kind of encourage inclusive parent community, we really try to engage all members. What we like to say about PAEDIC is that everyone can be a member of PAEDIC. It's not It's not handpicked. It's not, only a select few. Pretty much all parents have the ability to be members of this community. And so we try to make sure that we are exploring different aspects of diversity. And just so you know, PADIC, the acronym is Parents Association, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And so just even with that thought of socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, gender, sexuality, all of that, we attempt to discuss. And obviously we want to make sure that we're staying current and are not aloof with regards to things going on in the world, that we make it very practical and real, and challenge ourselves to engage in dialogue that may be uncomfortable at times and challenging. And as co-chair, what we try to do as well is be as vulnerable as possible. We come up with different events that can engage the community. The last event we had was pretty much a hit. We had a fast friending event, and by the way, Shirley Ann is the co-chair, and we get a lot of help from Jason. And we work also collaboratively with the PA Executive Committee, which we, pretty much have conversations with before any event. But our fast friending event, for that evening, we had an opportunity to really connect with each other across neighborhoods and color lines, and with the usage of Zoom breakout rooms, where we were able to create kind of intimate connections with other parents that we may not have had the opportunity to do so, currently in our settings with, COVID-19 and all. And so that was really, really good, because we had an opportunity to reflect on questions, kind of an increasing uncomfortability as the night progressed, that allowed us to really delve into other people's worlds and points of view that we might not have necessarily had the opportunity to do. And so that's just an example of one event, and we have way more to come, but we definitely encourage parents to be as open and vocal as possible, and challenge each other to do that. And it's kind of each one teach one. Yeah, because we can be siloed sometimes, but this group gives us the opportunity to collaborate and come together for the purpose of inclusion.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Natasha. And it seems to me that that group is something like 120 strong. I mean, it's the largest parent committee, so it's a pretty beautiful space. And Shirley Ann, somehow or another, the PA was successful in recruiting you to be a co-chair with Natasha. Why would you take on such a gig? Can you help us understand?
I guess the question is really, why wouldn't I? It was such an honor to be asked, and I think, Jason, as I said to you earlier, I say this genuinely from the bottom of my heart. I really feel humbled to have been asked to co-chair this committee, especially at this time in our country, to be able to reach out to parents and bring them in and have conversations. I think diversity is certainly a part of our, of who we are, but also inclusion is a huge part. So including as many voices as possible from the parent body, and bring everybody in, listen to everybody, listen to what people have to say. As Natasha mentioned, yeah, we have uncomfortable conversations sometimes, and that is appropriate, especially at this time. One of the other things that we have initiated this year that I'm excited about is we have a weekly query. And for those of you who are not familiar with what happens in Quaker meeting, is usually at the beginning of Quaker meeting. Quaker meetings are generally silent, which allows for reflection. There's a query that is asked, and it is a question that is meant for those who attend to reflect. And so every week, there is something that gets sent out to the entire school body called Friends Weekly Digest. And PADIC, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, we collaborate and we offer a query for parents to think about, and we do that biweekly. And started out sort of general and about how do we see the world, and now it's starting to narrow down into some really specific questions dealing with how parents relate to people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. How do parents relate to people who are of a different race, and how does that affect how their children see people from different backgrounds? And yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, you know, what you're sharing and what Natasha shared as well, just I think for me, puts a pin on this idea that this diversity, equity, inclusion, culture work is about the entire community. It's everyone, you know, it's from faculty and staff to parents and caregivers, administrators, trustees, and of course, most centrally, students. All of us are engaged in these conversations together. I think back to the summer and the number of dialogues, community-wide intergenerational dialogues we did, both in affinity spaces so that folks could think a little bit more about their own racial identities in light of all that was happening in our country at that time and continues to happen, as well as interracial spaces, cross-racial spaces, so that we could dialogue and think together and grow together. For me, that's what makes Friends such a special and transformative place, is that we believe that we're all in, we're in this all together, and that every single person has that light within them. And that when your light combines with my light, combines with that other person's light, we have enough light to light the world. And I think we all can agree that the world desperately needs that light, desperately needs the collective truth that can emerge when we come together and share the wisdom of our individual lives. Now, if you're like me, if I were in your shoes, I'd be wondering right now, like, how can I be a part of this community? How can I be a part of this family? And so I actually want to pitch it to Harriet, our fearless and amazing Director of Admissions and Enrollment Management, to give us a few words.
Thank you, Jason, as always. And good evening, everyone. Understanding how challenging it is to experience a school without being able to enter its doors, feel the warmth, and see the spirited engagement in the classrooms and in the hallways, we hope this evening helps you envision the Friends experience and how we put our values into action. For those of you who have questions about the application process, and for those whose questions we weren't able to answer this evening, we welcome you to reach out to our office at admissions@friendsseminary.org. It would be our pleasure to speak with you to help you learn more about Friends.
Thank you so much, Harriet. And to close our evening, I want to end in the same way that we began. I want to go back to this practice of breathing. And I want to invite you to adjust your body into a comfortable posture. And then I want us to take a deep, collective, unifying breath on 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale and exhale. We thank you so much for participating, for engaging with us. We're so grateful for you. We're ever so hopeful that you will apply to be a member of this community, and we're wishing you a wonderful rest of the evening. We leave you with Arundhati Roy's words: another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Good evening. Take good care, my friends.